You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to RX Radio. Myself, Jordan Junta here, joined with the one, the only, Jorge de Hoyos III, El Trace. Uh, welcome back, Jorge. It was great. Jorge and I just got to spend about 2 weeks together in Tampa at the level 3. We've developed this very mutual destruction type relationship where basically anything Jorge does, I try and do a little bit more. Period. That's just how it goes. It doesn't matter what it is. It's mostly around training and eating. Jorge is, a generous 237 pounds on the scale.
Oh,
I think that scale is a little
239
bit.
today. 239 today.
239. All right. No witnesses, but he says 239.
Yeah.
My scale weight this morning is 191 pounds. And my goal is I don't have a set date when I'm going to see Jorge next. I hope it's not too far in the future. But my goal is to weigh more than him on that day. So that's a summary of the relationship of where we're at right now. But I'll shut up. Jorge, how are you doing, man? Thanks for being here.
I'm doing good. I just want to clarify when you said the dynamic of the relationship, I want to emphasize the word try. You try to do more than I do, but it's honest effort. Let's leave it at that.
I try so hard.
It's a good relationship where we both win and we both lose, and we're both going to get to where we want to really fast, or we're both going to fall off. I was talking to, I think, Mac or Anna, but I was just telling I have like tendonitis from the last 2 weeks just from like going aggressively hard. And then the days that you took off, I just worked out with shallow. So it was like 2 ongoing weeks of just go. But we take it when we can have it.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think that's where we can take this today. I think there's a really good, there's a real benefit to having a good training partner and having a good training dynamic, and someone that you kind of have some sort of, we'll call it friendly competition, around accomplishing your goals. It's the cool part is that we talk a lot of shit, and it's pretty much all the time, but it's mutually beneficial. Like, I want to see you succeed. I don't know if you want to see me succeed. I hope you do. I'm gonna tell myself you do. But we're both training in the same direction, and we're challenging each other to get there. So I think that's a really important thing to have, and a really cool thing to find, that if you can find a training partner who aligns with what you're trying to accomplish, it creates a really good training dynamic in which you and that person can push each other, and you can push each other closer to your goals. And I think that's what we found over the last, I don't know, however many months, years that we've been doing this. And my goal right now is to get as big as I can, is to put on as much muscle as I can. And I've been on a pretty good roll with it. I've been gaining a bit. I'm probably when we started this, what would you say? Probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, a year and a half, 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I was probably about a solid 170 then. Still competing in Olympic weightlifting, kind of getting more into hypertrophy training, and understanding the benefits of hypertrophy training for strength training. And that's kind of where I'm trying to live right now, is somewhere between the realms of hypertrophy and strength training, not necessarily with the interest of competing in anything, just with the interest of being as strong as I can and being bigger than you. So with that being the goal, it's been good to have someone to push me and have something to strive for. And I've probably, like I said, in 2 years, I've gone from 170 to 191. So that's a reasonable amount of change over those years. If you math that out, that's just under a pound a month, consistently for 24 months. So in the next 24 months, this should put me, heavier than you.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. But I think we'll talk a little bit into the details of what that's looked like. But as far as your training, what have been the goals over the past, I don't know, year, or the goals moving into this next year? And what does it look like for you to try and accomplish those?
Yeah, no, before I get into that, I think the reason why this dynamic works is because we are right now, what, like 10, like 40 to 50 pounds apart.
Yeah.
So whenever we train together, uh, like in a lot of things, some things you match me, which I'm pretty upset about. And in a lot of things, like if I
Good.
get an edge of like a couple of pounds or a couple of reps, it's like objectively I won on the set. But subjectively, I know that I should be way more, like there should be a bigger distance because of the weight
Yeah.
difference. So it's a dynamic where we both lose, kind of.
Yeah.
But
My
we
goal
also
is to
both
make you
win.
feel like you lose even when you win.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I feel that for sure. I feel that for sure. But it's good because it pushes me hard. But the goal over the last 2 years, and I think it's pretty on par when we started this kind of like competition, that I started working with Mac.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
Mac, being the other co-host of the show, hired him as a coach. And the goal has been, I just want to put on a bunch of size. I had a bunch of issues surrounding some joints. Not that I don't anymore, but it's a lot better. So I just, the only things I told him is I want to be able to move a little better,
Hmm.
get as strong as possible, and get as big as possible. That's pretty much the whole goal. Again, no real intention of competing anytime in the near future, but just for my own enjoyment of being able to do things that look bigger. And I think going forward, the goal is really the same. I think we took about, and talking about progressions from the 2 years I've worked with him, the first year, it was like almost a full year of just like building a foundation. Like
Hmm.
volume was super low. We didn't really push anything on like food. And it was just a lot of working on a lot of things that I had ongoing because I coached myself for like the first, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years that I trained,
Hmm.
which got me to a good place, but also I have a really hard time kind of like pulling back on my own training. I could do it with my clients, but on myself, like I always want to toy with that line. So it helped to have like an objective set of eyes that could like, hey, we need to bring it down from like 6 to 4 days, or we need to do some other kind of like, clearly it's worked, but you've also put yourself in a position where now you have all these issues, right?
Hmm.
So the first year was kind of that. And now, I mean, the last, I don't know, 8 months, I went from like a baseline of consistently around 215 to 220 pounds to now like floating around that 235 and a little higher. So we clearly have pushed things on that side, but I think it would definitely would not have been possible without that first year foundation. Because even now, when we're pushing stuff, sometimes I feel like joints are starting to hurt, And I know that if that first year wasn't there, this second year would have been catastrophic, or it would have just been cut short. And the intention is to be able to keep pushing it into this next year and separating that gap from where you are to where I will be, and you'll never be able to catch me. That's really the goal. Trying to
I'm always,
discourage you so you stop trying.
I'll never stop trying. I'm an idiot. The definition of insanity, I'm an insane idiot is what I am. Doing the
Can I
same thing over
say,
and over again, expecting a different response. That's me. Like every time I'm going to kill myself in the gym and I'm going to get bigger. I don't get bigger, but I still do it.
I would just illustrate this, which is what just happened in Tampa. On the last day we were hinging, because our first hinge day was like, all right, well, we'll both go like 4 plates RDL. And we both got it. And it was a pretty hard, like 2 sets.
Yeah.
And the next day, you worked it a little later. So I did 4, and I was like, Jinta did 4 last week. I got to push it a little bit so he can't catch up. So I went 4.5, got my reps, and then you came in later. I was like, well, how much you do? And I didn't want to tell you. And I told you the weight, but not the reps. And I
Yep.
remember looking at the weight on the bar, and you said you'd only gone up to 4 in your life. And I remember after the trash talk, just going to you separately and be like, hey, man, like, competition aside, you don't have to do this. Like, I don't want you snapping your spine. And you just said, I will literally kill myself. And then went through the set and then matched my reps. So this story kind of illustrates what's going on here.
Yeah. I have an insane mentality towards training and I love it. And that's like, I mean, I want to highlight some of the things that you said, but before I say that, I'll say something dumb. But that's like a strategy I've always used for myself because, like, I'm the biggest I've ever been in my life right now. I'm
Yeah.
5'6", 190. Like that's an accomplishment in itself for me. But my entire life, from like high school until right now into the future, I've always trained with people that were much bigger and much stronger than me. And
Yeah.
that's always been a really good motivating factor for me, is seeing like, all right, because like when you see someone move a weight that you struggled with and they do it with ease, it's like, well, fuck. All right. Like that can be done. I want to do that. And it's pretty motivating in that sense for me. That might be discouraging for other people, but just
Yeah.
like seeing people be able to do the things that I want to do with ease, I'm like, this motherfucker can do it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. And it's like I like that idea of always having someone or something to chase, because it just keeps me motivated. It just keeps me like, all right, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? Like this person's doing that. Like, all right, maybe not right now, but I'm gonna work to be able to do that. And that's always been a huge motivating factor for me. So that's why I like training with you, because you're bigger than me for now.
Yeah.
You're stronger than me for now. But I'll kill myself to get there.
Dude, but the competition is real, because I remember like these last couple, like the other day you sent me a picture of 190 on the scale.
Yeah,
I remember that day, it was like late in the day. I was super tired. I had a bunch of food left to eat. And I just remember thinking, this guy's 190. No way he's going to get within 30 pounds of me. I just like ate my food. Next morning, just like killed myself in the workout. So it's like, even though I got the size on you, I know that I can't afford losing the next training session to you. So I'm just going to go all out.
that's right. And I'm gonna hit up Mac and be like, "Yo, I think it's time for Jorge to get on a cut, an aggressive cut. I'm talking like 1,600 calories a day."
No way.
Anyways, something that you said as you were talking about your training past and your goals moving to the future is you said that you spent a year building a
Yeah.
base for what you're doing right now. And I think that's a really important thing to highlight for anyone with, I mean, realistically, any training goals, is that you have to have that base of the pyramid so that you can build up to a meaningful peak. And I think it's something that gets overlooked a lot in terms of hypertrophy training, because a lot of what you're doing throughout the lifespan of training, it looks pretty similar. There's not a ton
Yeah.
of variance in the things that you do, but I think the variance comes in it more so internally. Like you're allowed to have more variance if you have greater range of motion, if you have pain-free range of motion, if you have greater abilities to stabilize the core, the pelvis, the hip, the shoulder. And the better you understand how to do those things and the more effective you are at doing those things, it gives you more options in the way that you can train. And that's something that I think is really important with something that becomes so repetitive, is you're doing this similar things, maybe not the same things, for long periods of time. We're talking years at this point, right? So from 1 week to the next, to the next, to the next, 1 month to the next, 1 year to the next, if there's small incremental decreases in function or range of motion or the ability to stabilize certain body regions, then what that's going to result in is an even more limited scope of training. You're going to be more limited in the exercises you can choose. You're going to be more limited in the effectiveness of those exercises. And I think that's something that I've seen even in like high level bodybuilders that they start to suffer from after a period
Yeah.
of time. So I think that paying attention, and that's why, Max the GOAT, you're the GOAT when it comes to this, because paying attention to those things and understanding that we're not going to accomplish these goals. Like I said, well, what did you say? 20 pounds in 8 months. I did it in 2 years, whatever. Um, but the idea is we're talking about like the time horizon is years when we're talking about this. It's a long-term commitment. So
Yeah.
in the scope of things, like taking a year, and it's not like it's a not productive year that you took to take that
Yeah.
step back and really establish joint function, get yourself healthy. Kind of another part of this too is like energy systems, and I'll speak to that in just a minute. But like when I first started doing hypertrophy training, switching from Olympic lifting, is I just didn't have the energy systems built up to be effective in hypertrophy training.
Yeah.
So that like I had to build a runway in terms of that progression. So taking that time, it's as I was saying, it's not a non-productive period of time, but what you're doing is you're building a really solid foundation that now once you take the time and you build that foundation, you won't have to do that again. You'll always have to circle back and touch on that, and there might be phases where you need to spend time focusing on, like you and I worked on this a bit in Tampa, like through your hip and knee. But there
Yeah.
might be times where you have to circle back and you have to reestablish a baseline of function, but it's not going to take a year to do that. It's going to take a lot less time to be able to get to that same level of function or further that level of function, because the more you progress in whatever it is towards your goal, you're going to need a higher level of function to be able to continue to push the envelope in terms of force output, in terms of joint variability, in terms of training variance. That's another thing too, is that the longer someone's training age is, the more appropriate it is to have more variance in their training. So like someone that's brand new to the gym, you can have them do like very, very basic stuff. Like you can have them do, I don't know, prime flat press. You can have them do a pec fly and then some tricep variations and just do that on repeat for a reasonable amount of volume. And they'll have progress for a long period of time. But the longer you do that for, the less effective that becomes. So you have to add in different pressing variations. You have to play with internal versus external stability. You have to play with tempos, like volume, intensifiers, things like that, so that you can still get incremental progress. And the progress you'll get over time is going to be less. So these little things become that much more important the longer you're doing this. Like, I don't know, in terms of humans, I think both of us are probably to the right side of the bell curve in terms of muscle mass and even body weight. Like even I'm to the right side of that. Like I'm sure
Yeah.
the average adult male is probably like 180 pounds or so.
Yeah.
Now, the further you get to the tail end of that bell curve, the less progress that there's going to be available. Like you can only have so much muscle mass as a land mammal breathing human. There's only so much that's possible to put on. So the closer you get to that, the harder it's going to be to have progress. And like you said, that year that you took to really establish a baseline and increase function, decrease pain, what you did there is you actually prolonged your training lifespan, because now you're able to run more current through the system. You're able to have a higher training output. You're able to have more variance in your training. Because another point too is that the less variety you have in the training, the more you're stressing the same structures in the same way over and over again. And the more you do that, the more prone you become to a few things. But one of those is going to be, we'll say, generally repetitive stress injury, which a lot
Yeah.
of times in hypertrophy training tends to be like tendonitis, joint pain. But then also the other side of that is you start to become the shape of the movements that you do, whether that's good or bad. Like if I just do prime flat press and pec flies, I'm going to be really good at those two things, but I'm not going to have the variance to do an incline dumbbell press, or not to a meaningful extent, because I haven't trained that. So the more variance you can add into your training, it just gives you more options in terms of, yes, having that incremental progress over time, but also it gives you greater variability so that you're not stressing your body in the same way, so that structures aren't going to break down. So there's a lot of value in that, and that's not haphazardly. I know that that didn't
Yeah.
happen just by coincidence. Like that's well thought out, and that's a really methodical way to go about training, especially with, fuck man, I love Mac. Like only the committed. Like he doesn't fuck
Yeah.
around. It's like, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna commit to how many years of training. Like the time horizon isn't 16 weeks out from right now. The time horizon is like, all right, we're going to take this year, we're going to get you right. And then the next 2 years, like you're going to put on 20 pounds in 8 months. Like that's insane progress. So
Yeah.
it's really, yeah, go ahead.
No. Yeah. I think that's it works if it works from like the coach and the client dynamic, right? Because I remember when I started working with Mac, he said like, oh, we're going to go into like a lower volume phase. We're going to work on these things. And I mean, good or bad on my side, I remember not even asking him like, hey, how long is this going to be for? Or any of these questions, which is like, I for sure, like whatever you say, we'll just roll with it, you know? And there was never, hey, can we like get out of this phase? You know,
Yeah.
it may have been some questions just like, hey, what's the plan? Like, what are we envisioning for the next couple of months? Just so I know, like what I need to be looking for. But it was never like, hey, we've been doing, I don't know, this split, or we've been doing these same exercises for 6, 8, 12 months now. Can we just swap them out? Because they were working. So there was no real reason for me to look for a different option. And I think that the ability to, for both from a client to be able to withhold that, and from a coach to not feel the pressure of, oh, my client is going to be upset if I don't give him a new program every month and to like change some stuff up. Like if it's working, it's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many people get caught up in like, how can I maximize the most amount of gains or strength gains in my current training block? And they just set up themselves in a cycle of like, can I get like a really high, and then I hit a wall, like either I can't progress or things hurt or whatever, tendonitis and limiting range of motion. Functionality is not there, and you have to like cycle back all the way down, and it takes you so much time to get back up. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very common in seeing this, even in people that have like an advanced training age, at least in regards to time of like in the gym. But it's a very beginner mindset of just, I want to do the most I could do right now, instead of just using each training block as like a little step to potentiate for the next training block and the next phase and the next one. And then you can continuously go up. Um, I don't know, I don't want to say indefinitely, but like a lot longer. And then maybe you have to circle back and touch on some things like you mentioned, but you don't have to be in this constant cycle of like, I push really hard and now I have to like chill out for a month or 2 months or whatever time frame where I have an injury. And you can just keep this steady progression going for a long time, where it allows you to push, whether it be volume or load, or can you build a capacity in different energy systems, like you mentioned? Can you start keep pushing food? Because that's something else that Mac I think does really well. Like, can we set a baseline on the nutrition side so we don't have any issues going forward? So I think it's part of planning, part implementation, part can you are you willing to delay gratification, if you will, on the getting bigger, getting stronger, and maybe like your workouts will not look super cool on Instagram, and it'll be the same thing one next to the one week to the next. But in the long term, it's what really allows you to like for you. It's like 1 pound a month for 2 years is like, especially having trained for, I don't know how long you've been training, but like I know probably like 15, more than 15 years at this point.
I've been training in a gym, like in a structured, like strength setting for, I thought about this the other day, for 22 years now.
Jeez. Yeah. So even for like someone who's super new to the gym, 1 pound a month for 2 years is insane. For someone who's trained that long, even if you switched like the type of training that you do, it's it's very rare to find that in like wherever you look. So I
Right.
think the ability to do that, and even being able to do it, because I mean, we've talked a bunch about like you had some issues with your quad tendon, you had some issues with other stuff, like being able to keep that progression even when you have to like, hey, I have to pivot now because maybe I can't push this side so much right now, but maybe I can focus on these other properties of movement or on these other areas of opportunity, even while you're dealing with, I don't know, X or Y, whatever you have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made two really good points in there that I want to expand on. The first of which being the faster your progress, the faster you're going to hit a wall. Like
Yeah.
in and like we can take a real example from this from again when we were in Tampa. Um, we did a couple pool workouts and we did dumbbell rows in those workouts.
Yeah.
I don't remember the weight we got up to on the first time. I think so. The dumbbells at the gym we're at are in kilos. So we did like just competition shit like we always do. I think we used 80 kilos or
Yeah.
85 kilos the first week. And we both kind of just did like, I don't know, we're like 8 to 12 reps, whatever. Like we'll hit as many as we can. We were both right around the 12 rep range. Like, all right, that was pretty like that was RPE like 9 to 11, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And then the next week we came back on our pool workout. We're like, fuck it. We're using the 90 kilo dumbbells this week. And it's like, there's no need to do that.
No.
But like, we just ramped up intensity very quickly. And a lot of people think like intensity needs to progress to have progression in the gym, which is absolutely not true. Intensity in terms of loading, right?
Yeah.
Intensity in terms of the way that you're approaching sets, the RPE that you're hitting, and the quality of the sets. Yeah, like these things need to improve session over session for you to have progress. But I've been on exercises where I'll be at the same weight for months at a time. And there's maybe just a marginal increase in reps that I'm doing. But I think a big thing that's important, especially in when you're trying to build muscle, it's going to be the quality of those reps. Like yes, we rode the 90 kilo dumbbell for a number of reps. I don't even remember. We'll say 8 just to make ourselves feel good.
I got 10, but yeah.
Yeah, if you got 10, then I probably got 12. But okay, that's a baseline. I did
Yeah.
this many reps at this weight. But you know what? That was too heavy for me to have a meaningful stimulus.
Yeah.
So like that was definitely ego lifting. So if I were to do that again, like there's no way I should progress from 11 reps because you got 10 to 12 reps to 13 to 14. That's not the progression that's going to benefit me in that scenario. The progression that's going to benefit me is probably not even going that heavy, but if I am going to go that heavy, is maintaining intensity in terms of loading, but improving quality in terms of movement
Yeah.
quality. So that means less movement outside of the joints that I'm trying to isolate. So like a dumbbell row, I want a very static core. I want a static lower body position. I'm just basically trying to create shoulder extension, right? I'm trying to bias the lats with this row. So if I were to improve upon this, it wouldn't be more reps or more weight. It would be less movement in the rest of my body outside of that shoulder joint is more isolated movement, more constant tension through the lat, maybe having some sort of tempo, something like that, like a dumbbell row. It's going to be a lot easier to have a meaningful tempo in the eccentric than the concentric, maintaining tension in between phases. So like as I control the eccentric, going right back into the concentric, as opposed to controlling the eccentric, kind of letting that arm hang for a bit, catching my breath, letting my lat recover, and then doing another rep. So if I can maintain better muscular tension throughout that rep, if I can isolate the movement pattern more, that's going to be the way that you progress. And anyone who's been training for a longer period of time, that's the way you have to look at progress, because it's not going to be more reps every week. It's not going to be more weight every week. It's going to be more subjective, qualitative improvement that you're looking for. That's still going to bring you the progress that you're looking for if you're controlling the variables outside of that. So I think that's a really important point to make, is that, like you said, it's the longer we can prolong a phase of training, making more qualitative progressions like that, the more effective that it's going to be. Because if we just progress load every week for 4 or 6 weeks, and then we have to change movements because we've reached the end of effectiveness in progression of load for that movement, then where do we go from there? There's not
Yeah.
anywhere effectively that we can go. So we need to be able to find constraints or find variables that we can improve upon that are not just reps, they're not just loading, so that we can prolong that as long as possible. And it doesn't need to change. The goal should be to do what you're doing as long as you can and get as much out of it as you can before you move on to the next movement, before you move on to the next progression or the next variation, or before you add another 5 kilos to your row. And I think that gets lost a lot of times, especially with newer lifters, because progress can be a very objective thing. We just have to make sure that we're measuring the objective variables that matter. Because especially in hypertrophy training, like I've been working with Corey lately, and she's been helping me a lot in terms of the other point that you said that I want to move on to next is nutrition. That's going to be one of your biggest predictors of if you're gaining muscle
Yeah.
or not, is if your nutrition matches your training. But also in terms of measuring objective variables outside of volume and loading, like I've done all my measurements, like shoulders, chest, waist, hips, legs, everything. And that's a very objective variable that is consistent with the goal of putting on more muscle mass, right? There's that, and there's scale weight. So, and progress pictures are another way as well. So you can look at all these things, and you're getting a lot of objective data around the variables that you're trying to improve upon. If I'm trying to grow my muscles, a good gauge of that is not how heavy I went on a dumbbell row, because there's a lot of subjective variability in, or even objective variability in the way that I'm moving. But a good gauge of that is, are my muscles getting bigger? Like that's what we're trying to do. So that's the sort of stuff that if we can start to communicate, and if we can start to build the value upon objective variables outside of loading, outside of the gym, then that's where we can start to really see some progress and start to pull away from that mindset of, all right, I need to do more than I did last week, or this has to be heavier than it was last week. Because that's, yes, over time we do want to see those objective markers improve, but within reason. And that's not going to be the primary driver of success here. That's going to be very secondary. And that's almost a result of doing everything else well, is that your weights, your reps will go up if you're adding more muscle, but it's not necessary that you're going to add more muscle because your weights are going up. And that,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Finish your thought.
I was going to move on to a new thought. So if you want to weigh in on that one, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that a good example of that in a way that we can think about not just looking at these objective like numbers on load and looking at different parameters that we can look at is when we were working together. I told you like, hey man, and this is probably not ideal, but like in a bunch of exercises, like my left hand was going numb,
Yeah.
just because I didn't have external
Mine
rotation in
wasn't,
my
by the
shoulder.
way. Mine wasn't.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
my left hand was going numb, and like even in curls, like after a couple curls left, like some fingers would go numb. It was affecting my pressing. It was affecting my. That's an appropriate shirt you're wearing right now for this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Shout out to Lock. Live fast, die young.
Let's go.
Leave a giant coffin.
We're striving. We're striving for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was affecting my pull-ups. It was affecting my pressing. So like doing specific work for my shoulder maybe wasn't going to get me bigger, but it was definitely going to help the movements that were actually going to get me bigger and stronger, right? So you helped me work on my shoulder a little bit, gave me a couple of things to work on, and then immediately after, all of the other movements that I was struggling with instantly became better. And I remember like a very specific example we were doing some like, I forget if it was incline bicep curls or just like face away bicep curls. So like my humerus was in some degree of like hyperextension, and I was struggling with that external rotation. And my progression from one set to the next wasn't like bumping the reps or bumping the weight. It was like adjusting something within the lift itself, like how I was setting up and adjusting like the angle in which my humerus was. So trying to improve the quality, understanding like, hey, the reason why this exercise is in the workout session today, sure, we're trying to get some stimulus to the bicep, but we're trying to get some specific, like drive some specific adaptation at the shoulder just from the position that we can set it in. And if you just at load or at reps and you're not like getting the quality of the movement that you're trying to extract, then you might as well pick any other exercise and just keep the problem going on from session to session. But like being able to understand like what's the intent of the exercises we have right now, and can we ensure that the adaptation that we're trying to drive is being acquired by a proper execution of the movement, which in my case, normally we're looking to some degree of external rotation and the humerus at that level, but I didn't have access to that much. So I had to decrease the amount of rotation so I could actually perform the movement. And I think carrying that forward, like that's a very specific example of like, hey, this is here so I can improve my shoulder function. But understanding like, if is this movement, like if it's a hack squat, like, hey, just load it heavy, hams to your calves and just full send. But understanding that some exercises will have some secondary, tertiary benefits, and can you ensure that you maintain those while you still add some meaningful load to drive that adaptation?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great example of kind of that process we just outlined, where there needs to be some level where you're focusing on increasing function so that you can now have meaningful output in the exercises that are really going to push the envelope forward. So I absolutely agree with that, and that's my rationale behind all of this too. And the next point that you mentioned, that this is something that I think gets overlooked a lot of times in beginner, novice, even intermediate training level athletes, is how much of an impact the things that you do outside of the gym are going to have on your workouts and ultimately the results that you get from those workouts. So the number one thing I'd say is going to be diet outside of that. Like
Yeah.
that's something that for me it's always been a struggle to eat enough food that I actually have the objective progress I'm looking for in terms of scale weight, in terms of putting on more muscle mass. And that's something that I know exactly what I need to do, but it's just very hard for me to execute on that. So some of the things that have been really helpful for me to put that importance on that and continue to execute on that are knowing that you're over there in Colorado eating 4 pizzas a night to get calories in. So I'm over here eating, I don't know, what did I have? Short ribs and sour straws and this coconut cum mixture thing. I don't even know what the fuck it was, but just very high calorie foods so that I
Yeah.
can actually meet those caloric requirements that it takes for me not only to maintain the muscle mass that I have and sustain training intensity, but actually be in a surplus where I'm able to add muscle mass. So I'm creating an environment that's going to allow me to adapt to the stimulus that I'm trying to elicit with everything that I am doing in the gym. So one of those things that's really helpful for me to put the importance on that to the point where I actually execute on it. Uh, First is knowing that you're over there eating pizzas at, I don't know, 10,000 feet of altitude. So your workouts are probably trash. You're actually looking a little skinny right now. So I don't know.
I'm gonna
We'll
tag
talk
you
to Matt
tomorrow.
about this. But aside from that, like now I said I've been working with Corey and she has me just log everything in a spreadsheet. Like, did you hit your calories this day? And it's every single day I go in and I'm said, this is what I ate. This is how I felt because of it. And it's that accountability, knowing that. And I typically don't have an issue with that. Like I can hold myself accountable and I can do this stuff, but it's over the time horizon that it takes. Like I said, 20 pounds over 2 years, like within that 2 year period, there's been a lot of time where I'm like, you know what? There's a lot going on at work. I'm stressful. Like I had a shitty workout today. It's been a long day. Like I'm going to just do the bare minimum and I'm going to, hit my protein intake and that's all I'm going to do. Like I'm not going to eat enough carbs. Like it's exhausting to me to eat the amount of food that I have to eat to continue to have progress sometimes. So just having some sort of external accountability around that is really helpful for me. Knowing that like, all right, like there's these expectations that I'm going to eat 475 grams of carbs so I can be bigger than Jorge. And that can be a daunting task, and it still is. But having these other variables that contribute to motivation towards that are really helpful for me. So that's where like the competitive aspect of this helps. That's where the accountability aspect of that helps for me, is that knowing that like, okay, the easy part for me is going to be going to the gym and pushing myself in the gym. Like
Yeah.
I got that. Like I don't need the motivation there. Like I can do that, period. Like I don't need anyone else to hold me accountable there. But it's the things outside of the gym that are going to matter the most to me meeting these goals. And they're the things I struggle with the most. So it's having those external things that keep me accountable that have actually been the thing that at this point in my training career, like I said, I've been training the gym for 22 years. Yeah, the gym or the goals along the way have uh they've kind of shifted and I've focused on different things, but like at this point of training, like it's not about sport performance. It's not about performing at a specific task or a goal. It's my goal is to add muscle mass. So the thing that's going to help me do that is making sure that I'm doing the things that are going to contribute to that. And that's more than just working out.
Yeah, I want to mention two things there. Like on what you just said, I think it's very easy to get lost in like your goals shifted. Naturally, the things you need to do to get to your goals also shift. But I think it's easy to fall into like this is what I've done, this is what I like to do, and not align your actions to where you want to go. because
Yeah.
even in your training, because you're good at overhead things, you're good at like squatting things, but even if you keep some of it in your program, you know that if your training remains the same, you're not going to add the muscle mass that you want to add. If your diet remains the same, you're not going to add the muscle mass you need to add, right? So understanding that if your goals shift, or even if your goals don't shift, but you aren't driving towards your progress, understanding that maybe the things that you like or the things that are part of your day to day are not the things that you need to do. And that's for a lot of people, I think, like a tough pill to swallow. It's just knowing like, oh, I'm not getting progress because I don't know why. It's like, if you're not getting progress, you're not doing the things that get you progress. Like, just like plain
Yeah.
and simple. And the other thing that you mentioned, other than accountability, and you kind of glossed over it, but is you said create an environment to where I could achieve these things, right? So I'll take you as an example. Like, you're busy, you run your practice, you do other things, you do pre-script stuff. So it shouldn't take you by surprise to know you're busy, right? You already know you're going to be busy. So if you just go into the day and say like, hey, like I didn't have time to eat this, like you already knew that you weren't going to have time. Like, how can you create an environment where, despite those things that are going to happen, that you know are going to happen, you can still do the things that you need to do to get the goals that you want to reach? And uh, I think Mac has helped me a bunch with that, and like even like easy things like, can I get some high calorie foods? Can I do some like food prep at one point? Or am I just going to buy food out of convenience? But understanding like I know what the obstacles are going to be. If you know, they shouldn't catch you by surprise when they show up. Like, you should be prepared. You should be able to like set yourself up in a way where failing becomes hard just because you already kind of like foresaw all these things that could come up in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. And it's something that if you're not preparing for, then you're not actually putting yourself in a situation where you're going to succeed. Right. I understand the situation that I'm in. And like for me, some of those things are I need to get a lot of calories in early in the day.
Yeah.
Like it's I eat a ton of food for breakfast because if I don't do that, then I'm behind for the day. And then it's a daunting task having to eat this much food. And I know that like for me, my calorie consumption is at the front end of the day, like breakfast and dinner. Throughout the day, like
Yeah.
anytime from like 7 to 7 realistically, like I'm on the move. So it's like what this looks like for me is I'm gonna eat a big breakfast. I'm gonna eat as much food, get as many calories in as I can as early as possible, and then being prepared to have easy things that I can eat or having food prepared for pre-workout, post-workout, like a lunch during the day, knowing that if I eat a certain amount before I get home for dinner, like it's going to be easy for me to eat what I need to eat and I'll still be comfortable enough to get as much sleep as I need to get so that I can be in a good position for the next day. And if I get behind on that, then I'm just cramming food towards like the latter half of the day. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be really full trying to sleep. I'm not going to have a good night's sleep. And then it's going to affect the next day after that. So it's understanding that not only setting yourself up for success in that moment, but if I fail today, it's going to make it even harder to succeed tomorrow. And it's just going to be this chain reaction of events that sets a negative trajectory for your progress. So there's another variable that I have around this too is that like there's specific foods or specific ways of eating that I feel better about, and there's ones that I feel worse about. Like I can hit the calorie. Like yesterday's a good example for me. Like I had a busy morning. I didn't get as much food in as I'd like throughout the day. So for me to hit the amount of food that I needed to hit, like I drank like two full sugar Gatorades. I had a bag of Cheez-Its. I had like three Fairlife shakes and two Pop Tarts midday because I didn't prepare. I didn't have a lunch ready. I didn't have like meat, vegetables, rice. Like I didn't have quality foods with me. And like even though yes, I hit my calorie intake, like I feel worse today because of it. Because of the
Yeah.
foods that I chose to eat yesterday, because I chose this is a choice. I chose to not be prepared yesterday. And I took that choice. I accepted that choice and I did what I had to do to still execute on the things that I needed to objectively succeed in that day. But now there's a subjective consequence because of that. Like today is now like my training's not going to feel as good. My sleep wasn't as good. And there's going to be residual effects because I wasn't as prepared. So so I think that's a good thing to highlight, is that you need to create an environment for you to succeed, not only in the moment, but succeed in the future. And that's a lot of that is like taking actions to support making this easy. Because like if you have a lot of food to eat, that can be a daunting task. But if you have 3 meals prepped throughout that next day, and that makes it a lot easier. If I can just, have my breakfast at the same pace that I do, I'm not rushed getting out the door. On my way out, I can grab 3 Tupperware containers and go to work. And I just know, like, all right, this time, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to eat pre workout, post workout, and then, early afternoon. And that sets me up for success, so that not only am I hitting these objective markers with more ease, with less stress, but I'm doing it in a way that's actually going to continue to set me up for success the next day, the day after, the day after, because I'm doing it in a way that's going to be more sustainable. Because it is like, if I keep eating the way I ate yesterday, I will get diabetes. And that's not the goal. The goal is not to get diabetes. The goal is to add muscle and feel good, and be strong and perform well. And there's going to be times where, yeah, I do what I need to do to hit those markers, to hit those variables. And I think we all get there. And especially the more calories that you're eating, the harder it is to do that with like meat and vegetables and rice and whatever it might be. But the more often you can do that with higher quality foods, the better you're going to feel, and it's going to be that positive reinforcement. As opposed to if I'm doing that with lower quality foods, it's almost going to be a negative reinforcement. Like objectively, yes, I'm
Yeah.
doing what I need to do, but at the same time, like it's now my diet's affecting my workouts in a negative way because of the way that those foods are making me feel.
Yeah. And when you say you do what you need to do to get like your objective goal for the day, I think that shows a real kind of like order of priorities, right? Because
Hmm.
as it
Yeah.
should come to no surprise to anyone, at this point, if it comes down to it, you value try to get bigger and stronger over feeling well. So if
Yes.
you valued
Absolutely.
feeling well, yeah,
To a
no
detriment.
surprise to anyone. If you valued feeling well over hitting your goals to getting bigger, by nighttime, you would say, hey, if I eat all this food, I'm not going to sleep well. Tomorrow's going to be trash. I'm just going to skip the meal and then I'll try again tomorrow. But you value actually being consistent on hitting your goals every day. So you're willing to take the L for one day on one side to be able to progress on the other side. Now, ideally, it doesn't come to that and you can get both, but it's a show of is what you're doing aligning with what you say you want, right? And
Yeah.
in your case, it is, but it's a good show for a lot of people on the same thing we are talking about. Like, can you is your constant action aligning with the supposed goal you have? And if not, maybe you don't want that thing, or maybe you just need to prepare better, or however you want to view it. But I think it's very important to, because in that moment, the next day, when you feel like trash, you don't just say, "Ah, this sucks," and I feel terrible. So you chose that, and you want that. So kind of like take the responsibility and know, like, I feel like this because I choose my goal, and I also choose to take responsibility that if I didn't plan for it, I'm going to accept the bad part that comes with trying to push for my goals, right? Because if not, it could be really really easy to like, I don't know, like let go of your goal just because it doesn't feel great the next day, or at
Mhm.
least maybe not go let go fully, but like take your foot off the gas, and maybe one day it's not 100% and it's like 90, and then eventually you just fall back into where you were, and then you're still struggling to get 180 pounds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And maybe a good overarching theme for this entire podcast is, when you're trying to do this, like if your goal is to add size, to get bigger, to add muscle, get stronger, insert whatever goal that might be here, the big thing is minimizing collateral, right? Like whether that comes down to increasing shoulder function so you can train better, or whether that comes down to choosing the proper foods to meet your calorie requirements so that you can grow. The goal is to minimize collateral. There's all of these things are going to have positive and negative effects, and you are in control of what you choose and what aligns with your goals in accomplishing that. but there's going to be better and worse ways you can go about it. Like there's plenty of people that get really big and really strong with a lot of collateral, like a
Yeah.
lot of like you can injure yourself. Shout out Stu Locke, love you, brother. But he's a big, strong motherfucker. But he's there's been some collateral, so that's something that you need to understand, and that's a responsibility that you have to take on when you have these goals, and you have to be very realistic with yourself of, all right, how much collateral am I willing to accept in this process? Like 400 or 500 carbs a day, like, yeah, I might be putting myself at risk for diabetes by doing this for long periods of time. And it's probably not healthy. But can I accept that collateral to meet my goals? And knowing that, this isn't something I'll always be doing, but how long can I sustain this for? How long can I feel this way? How long can I wake up bloated and still eat 2,000 calories for breakfast? How long can I sustain this amount of training, the amount of fatigue that training elicits for me to continue to push the envelope forward before I need to pull back and reevaluate. So that's something that I think people are not honest with themselves enough when they choose their goals. They don't really understand the collateral that it's going to take to get to those goals. And also understanding that it's not a linear thing. Though it's not I do this forever and I have to progress the collateral along with my pursuit of these goals. This stuff, it happens in a cyclical pattern. Like there will
Yeah.
be a phase like where maybe, to use myself as an example, maybe I'm not growing a pound a month every month for 2 years. Maybe some months it's 1.5, some months it's 2, and other months it's maintain or actually lose a little bit. Right? It's not this linear process to get to where we're going. It's peaks and valleys along the way, and you have to do that in a way where you're balancing success with collateral. You're succeeding in accomplishing the things that you need to. You're accepting the collateral along the way, and then there's going to be periods where there's collateral mitigation, right? You have to mitigate the effects of what that training or what that diet has done to you in that period of time. So I think a really good point to make to kind of sum up a lot of what we talked about on this podcast is like, yeah, no matter what your goals are, the bigger your goals, the more extreme your goals, there's going to be more collateral associated with that. And you need to be willing to accept that risk. But there also needs to be a period where you mitigate that collateral so that it doesn't just run away and it doesn't turn into a major setback.
Yeah. Kind of like to finish that off, I think the further you get on that bell curve we're talking about, whether it be like high performance or high achievers and whatever, it may not even be competition, just getting like bigger, strong. If you're getting to the tail end of that bell curve, collateral is going to be almost like inevitable. And I think like on the case of Stu, he understood that and he was
Right.
willing to roll with it, which is why I just like hats off to Stu. But
That's off this
also
too.
on the other side, understanding that if you're not on that like far end of the bell curve, there's no point in taking on like unnecessary collateral for the glory of it. Like
It's a great point.
just
Yeah.
like taking on like, oh, like, and this doesn't just apply for training. Just like if you're any sort of like high achiever, it makes no sense in like, oh, I'm not sleeping at all and like everything hurts, but I push with training. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way if you're not there yet. If you're not towards that like tail end of the bell curve, there's no real point in just glorifying on that unnecessary collateral for some outward show of, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, grind. If you could just minimize that and actually keep that progression running for a lot longer, would serve you a lot better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think this is a great conversation. I think it touches on a lot of the aspects that might get overlooked when people have either aesthetic goals or even if it's sport performance or strength. Like these are all things you have to account for. It doesn't matter. Like we're talking about bulking, gaining size right now, but these things matter no matter what your athletic goals are. So it needs to be something where you make that assessment. You're honest with yourself. It's probably best for most people. It's probably best for all people to outsource some of this responsibility to someone else. Like no one
Yeah.
expects you to be an expert in all these areas, and I'm not. Like I get a lot of nutrition questions and I don't talk about them because I don't feel qualified to be the one to talk about them. Like the things I talk about, I can talk about from a place of authority because I'm very confident in the things that I know, and I'm also very confident in the things that I'm not confident to give people advice on. So like training, yeah, I got that. Like I'll talk to anyone about training, but like the nutrition, the timeline side of things, like realistic goals and variables around body composition, that's not my area of expertise. And that's why I'm having better progress now having outsourced that.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to realize if you were listening to this, if you do have these goals, is that no one expects you to be the one with all these answers because you, myself, it doesn't matter who it is. We don't have all the answers. We have some very specific answers, absolutely. And maybe it's, yourself or myself or Mac or whoever it is can give you a pretty complete outlook. But there's always going to be people that have very niche specialty that can help
Yeah.
you excel in the areas that you struggle with. So if you can identify those areas that you're having the most trouble with and you can outsource that responsibility to someone else, that's just going to ensure that you have better progress. And that's a very mature and responsible decision to make that I don't think a lot of people have the maturity to do.
No, nothing else to add other than the fact that I hope you're not slacking out there. I see.
Yo,
I don't know. Your training seems a
next,
little sloppy, but it's fine.
yeah, that's a lie. If that's all you got, I know you're grasping. Like you're trying to find something, man. I will murder myself in the gym.
I don't know, man.
So,
I've never seen footage of you training when you're not with me on hypertrophy type stuff. I only see the ollie lifts and that. So
all right, all right.
when I see it,
We'll
I'll
get
believe
you
it.
some footage. I'll get you some footage. I learned what a rest pause is this week, and
Oh,
I've been
now I'm
abusing
in
myself with
trouble.
it. I've been abusing myself. Well, first off, thanks for being here, Jorge. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Next time we do a podcast together, there's going to be a weigh-in before we start talking. We'll have
All right.
scales in frame for everyone that watches. If you guys are still listening, I appreciate you for being here. Some things that are going on in the Prescript world right now. We just opened up sales for Dr. Dwayne Jackson's body composition course. It's a very comprehensive course on all things nutrition, all things body composition to get you and your clients to your goals, whether that is gaining weight, whether that's cutting down, whether that's maintaining, whether that's finding a better level of health or risk mitigation in training. He can help you. He's an invaluable resource. Dwayne is the man. He's incredibly knowledgeable. He's been doing this longer than I've been training. That's for sure. So if you're interested, head over to www.pre-script.com. Registration is up. Go to the navigation bar. We'll have the body composition course over there on the right hand side. You can check that out. Plenty of information. Beautiful landing page that Matt Penny just built out for us. If you're interested in connecting with us, hop in the Prescript Collective. A lot of exclusive content there, emerging ideas with Eric Bagheera. We have literature reviews. We have our community Discord, hundreds of coaches worldwide you can connect with. You can get answers to your questions in areas of expertise that maybe you're not as much of an expert, but I guarantee you there's someone in there that is an expert in that realm. So get connected with us. Jorge, what's the Instagram handle if someone wants to reach out to you?
Just my name, Jorge de Hoyos, and then underscore whatever. I'm always happy to help out and talk.
Awesome. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.